what we have right now is that I have it upright. The Black Magic is not talking to the software, which has got upgraded. I only have a test pattern, so right now it's not talking to the wire.
Okay.
So I do have a recording, and the recording looks like it's going fine.
Yeah.
So we can record it and just post it up tomorrow. He's not answering me. It's delivered, but it's
so give me 5 minutes to kind of
give me 5 minutes. Is not, I mean, I see video. I see that you have. All right. Whenever you're ready.
Hey, Kurt. Sorry. Do you have a clicker for the PowerPoint so I can just make my own slides again?
There you go.
So if I just click this against,
You're all set.
shoot it over here or shoot?
Yeah, it should be fine. It should reach back here. If not, I'll get you manually.
Okay.
No, if it don't work, I'm on it.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order this public meeting of the Princeton Board of Education. The board is an elected, unpaid group of 10 citizens who set policy and make decisions on educational, financial, and personnel matters for the Princeton Public Schools on behalf of all residents. We're always pleased when members of the community attend our meetings. The board and the school district operate under applicable New Jersey laws and under regulations of the New Jersey State Board of Education, and each meeting includes at least one opportunity for those attending to comment on items of the published agenda or on other matters of interest to them. The board reserves the right to limit the time allotted to public participation, and law limits discussion of individual personnel and confidential matters. We hope that our meetings provide useful opportunities for communication between the board and the community, so thank you for attending. And if I didn't say this at the beginning, this is the Tuesday, October 9th special meeting of the board. And with that, Ms. Kennedy, would you call the roll?
Yes. Patrick Sullivan.
Here.
Betsy Baglio. Absent.
Oh, she's coming in right now.
Oh, I'll call her back then. Beth Barron.
Here.
Debbie Braunfeld.
Here.
Jessica Deutsch.
Here.
Bill Hare.
Here.
Daphne Kendall.
Here.
Betsy Baglio.
Here.
Evelyn Spahn.
Here.
Greg Stankiewicz.
Here.
Michelle Tuck Ponder. I don't think I missed anybody, did I, with going out of order? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a short agenda tonight. It's really to discuss the referendum and what we put on the referendum and when. And so we're on item B, which is President's comments. And before I start, I'll just remind people that we do have a public comment session coming up. There are some clipboards outside in the hall, and if anyone would like to speak, if you could just sign up on one of those clipboards, and then we can make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. So they'll be there for a few more minutes if you want to sign up. So welcome tonight. This is the culmination of a very long process, or at least an important milestone in a very long process that we've gone through to work on the renovation of our school buildings. And it started, more than 20 months ago with initial designs and looking at the potential for where we could put things, and it's advanced with over 30 public meetings with a lot of public input. And one of the things that the board has been mindful of all along is to listen to the community, both in terms of the design, in terms of the cost, in terms of what gets done when, and to answer questions that people have along the way about how decisions are or were being made. I think it's been a pretty good process, and I know when you're in it, it might seem frustrating, but that's the way that democracy works, that we need to listen to each other and give each other time and room to speak. Over the last 4 weeks, we've been in quite a few, we individual board members and many of you in this room have been at different public forums that discuss referendum issues. We've gone through 3, 4, 5 tours perhaps of the high school with different people who are interested in the state of the facilities there. We had a meeting in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood at the Presbyterian Church on Witherspoon Street, and listened to a lot of voices in the community. And I think, as we all know, what the state of play has been over the past 20 or so months is from a renovation of many of our buildings, including a major renovation of the high school, to something much less than that, that would address kind of current issues only. And I think what we've learned, and I think what the board has concluded, but we're all going to talk about it tonight, is that we're in the middle of a broad spectrum of opinion, and that it's our job as a board to represent the community as a whole as best we can. I think also one of the things that we may have learned at a national level over the past couple of years and even over the last weekend, couple of lessons. Number one is people who ought to be engaged really ought to be engaged to get the result that they want. There's no staying home in democracy if you want to be successful. And the other thing I think we learned is that it's important to find a compromise that's a broad compromise that works for a large section of the community, our children, as well as our economically stressed members of the community, everybody. We don't want a solution that we ram through with 51% of the vote and we're successful. We want a solution that brings this community together. And I think in some of those forums where we both spoke and listened, one of the things I think finding common ground is that we all believe, number one, that we need to protect and take care of our children. I think we all can agree, number two, almost all of us, that the buildings, after about 20 years since the last major referendum, need work. And so the question isn't whether to do something, but how to do it in a way that we can all come together on instead of driving us apart. I've said many times over the last month, too, that when we find a compromise, we'll know if we found it when nobody's happy. And so that's what we're really looking for, is to find a way to have everybody unhappy, walk out of this room unhappy. And I think we're going to get there tonight. So I would like to make a proposal for the board to discuss, and again, it's just a discussion item. Kurt, if you can put the PowerPoint on the wall, I just want to make sure that it's in writing so people understand the proposal that's before us today. Initially, what I think we and I would like to propose to keep in mind is we need to find, number one, a compromise, but number two, we need to address these issues. They're not going away, and the demographics and the dilapidation of the buildings, neither one is going away. So I'd like to propose a 12-month plan to address these needs. And the first part of that plan is to put in December a question on the ballot of $27 million, which is, I think if you've been involved in this discussion already, we've initially called question one. It's the $27 million that includes roughly $10 million at the high school to expand about 100 seats, to upgrade the counseling areas, to upgrade put in a second food area, to deal with security at all the buildings, to deal with HVAC at many of the buildings, to deal with the pressing needs of our infrastructure that can't wait. And so put that on the ballot. We would vote on it tonight, and it would be on the ballot for December 11th, 2018. But this would be part of a longer process. It wouldn't just be the end of the road by any means. As I said, it's a 12-month plan, and so the next bullet, Kurt, I guess I can do this, Kurt. There we are. The next bullet would be to begin a set of community dialogues. What I am suggesting is a mediated forum for broad community input on our facilities needs and costs. I mean, some of the questions that we've had over the last 8 to 12 months have been, what are we doing? There's been the why are we doing it? And there's also been the how are we doing it? I think there's also been, between the what, why, and the how, some details. I really want to understand, if you're doing this, what are the steps that you've taken to make sure that you're doing this the right way? So there's sort of, within a how, there's more detail than that. I think the thing that we need to be mindful of, and the board is concerned about, is that Steve Cochran has spent countless hours to date working on referendum questions, and he's done a wonderful job at it. The issue is that we really hired Steve to work on issues of education and to focus on our kids. And so he's spent a lot of his time over the last year almost now talking to all of us about buildings and how the buildings are going to fit together and how they work. I think that obviously the administration, the building principals, the teachers, all need to have input into a revised process. But we'd like to have it mediated, this is my suggestion, that we have it mediated by a neutral party who can collect thoughts and build ideas and consensus, much the way if any of you participated in our strategic planning sessions a few years ago, where we got into a room and put things on a wall and then aggregated that up into what became our strategic plan. And in that community conversation that would happen over the next few months, we would want to make sure that the town had a role to play in terms of sharing their expertise and their vision for things like traffic, land use, the things that they know so well. We want to make sure that not only are their voices heard, which they have been up to now, but that people hear their voices being heard, and so that everyone understands that they are also part of the process. If we did that, the goal would be to work towards a next stage in the referendum in September to November of 2019, sometime in the fall of 2019, a second referendum to deal with the questions that we all conclude need to be on the referendum at that time. The board was in a retreat, and we had a speaker who was former school board president in Lumberton, and he mentioned that they had 5 referendums over 5 years to deal with the growth from that small rural community to what it is today. I'm not saying that we need 5, but all I'm saying is that whatever happens in September, November 2019 could be everything else, or it could be some portion of what we conclude we want to do ultimately. I think a plan like that would be a compromise that would both deal with the issues and not deny that our children need better space and they need it soon. But it would also give us a little bit of breathing space and a little bit of time for all of us to listen to one another and make sure that our voices are being heard. We're never going to please everybody, but taking a break like that might help bring many of us together in a broader consensus to where we want to go. If we did that, and we were shooting for something on the ballot by September, November 2019, we would need to have a consensus plan, and that's my next point here, consensus plan no later than May 2019. So to those parents and others who say, what about now? What about my children now? And how are we going to address the issues that my child is facing every day? This plan would still get us improvements by 2021, 22, and we wouldn't be missing a lot of time in terms of the construction cycles and the school cycles. To those who say that the current plan, the full $130 million, is too expensive and too big of a bite, this gives everyone a chance to space it out a little bit. As we all have seen the graph many times now, we have 3 to 4 years where the old bonds roll off, and then we have taxpayers have a little bit of more financial breathing room so that we can stage some of this construction over that bubble and then push it out and make it easier on people who are financially distressed. So that would be the plan. It's not simply putting one question on the ballot and going home. It's re-engaging on the other questions and making it part of a process that we all can get behind in the next 6 months, and then move forward in the fall for something that has a 21 to 22 construction date on it. That's the proposal that I've discussed and shared with many folks on the board. And I think just in terms of before we have on the agenda discussion with the superintendent, which includes a bit of Scott Downey going over what's in the $27 million. And so I just wonder, would you like to speak first and then have Scott go and then have a chance for the board to discuss? Is that the best way to do it? And then go from there. So that's the proposal, and Steve can add to it or qualify anything we want, and then Scott will talk, and then the board will have a chance to discuss that proposal, and then we'll turn it over to anyone in the public who'd like to add their thoughts. So with that, Steve, turn it over to you.
Yep. Thank you, Pat. Thank you all who are here tonight and have been engaged in this conversation about our kids in our community for many months. The $27 million question that Mr. Sullivan talked about is one around which I hope our community can coalesce. It's a question that addresses most of our immediate and essential needs related to safety, security, HVAC at every single building. It's also a question that devotes nearly $11 million to the high school to renovate the counseling center, to create a small dining distribution center on the main floor, to add 4 new instructional classrooms, and to expand space and facilities for athletics. But as we consider a single smaller question tonight, I really want to emphasize the larger goal. And that goal for me is to fully address the needs of our current and future students in a way that honors the economic diversity in our town. We still have urgent needs for expanding capacity at our middle school and high school. More students are coming, and we need to provide them with space, ideally space that supports the educational best practices we're already using in our schools and the 21st century learning goals that we have for our kids. But we also have very real economic conditions, both locally and nationally, that affect the ability of some in our community to shoulder the tax impact of the full referendum at this particular time. So I believe that uniting the community now around a smaller question for our schools will better enable us to engage, I hope, all members of our community in a process that looks objectively and creatively at ways to achieve the larger vision for our children, a process that, that Pat is suggesting. Given that the 5-6 school, even if we voted on that in December, would not be able to open until the fall of 2021, we actually now have time to facilitate a process that does bring us together. As one of our board members shared with me yesterday, quote, schools should unite our community, not divide it. And I believe this is our opportunity to do just that. As you mentioned, our architect, Scott Downey, is here with us once again this evening. And Scott,